I was accepted into the Transcontinental in 2023. At that point, I had a broken femur and I didn't know how to ride a bike. We obviously didn't get it perfect in LEJOGLE. I lost consciousness, went into hypoglycemic shock. The last night, my body actually went into shock during my last nap.
One thing I'll regret when I'm 70 or on my deathbed that I didn't work enough, but I'll probably think I didn't cycle enough. You know, what I'm surprised about there is you went for Mars, not Snickers.
I did. Are you Team Snickers?
I'm Team Snickers, yeah, absolutely.
You can feel incredible. That's irrelevant. How you're feeling is irrelevant. What is relevant is you have to keep pedaling your bike.
Okay, so welcome to the second ever Kostüme podcast. Having started doing this over a year ago, planned to do things monthly. It's been a year to the second one, which is just how it goes. Going to try and do this a bit more recently. We're here today with two world record holding endurance cyclists. We've got Alan Colville and Dr. Sarah Ruggins, each of whom hold some pretty impressive world records. You guys are quite interesting, so we've obviously known each other quite a while, and I've been sort of planning this conversation in my head for a long time, and now we're sat here, brain's obviously gone completely blank. So from my perspective, what's fascinating about both of you is the kind of differences and the similarities. So you're both like, if you were to meet you and not know what you've achieved on a bike, you might not assume that. You're both very, there's no ego, you're very sort of gently spoken, but when you start talking about performance and records and everything, you see this little glint in the eye, and it's quite fascinating. And I think from my perspective, I think there's been an awful lot spoken about each of your records, and like Sarah especially with the record attempt at the moment. We're probably going to publish this while the record's actually happening, so
I hope I'm doing all right.
Wherever you are, Sarah. But yeah, I think there's something about the psychology of like human endurance and like really pushing yourself to that extent, and I think more and more people are starting to do that, right? Like if you look statistically at cycling, like the distances people are traveling every year on their bikes is getting higher and higher. People are doing a lot more of these multi-day events, they're popping up much more frequently. There's a whole ecosystem being built around that now, and so I think even in terms of like the apparel that's being sold, the style of bikes that are being sold, the way things are being marketed, it's an interesting subject for a lot of people. So I kind of wanted to skip a little bit, maybe the deep dive on the backstories, and talk more about the kind of the psychology, maybe a bit about the training. There's a lot of mileage there, excuse the pun, on those subjects. So yeah, Alan, perhaps like maybe give us like a really brief potted history of like, you've been riding for what, 10 years?
Right, I came really late to cycling, so I didn't start cycling properly until I was about 33.
Okay.
And found mountain biking and absolutely fell in love with it. So kind of realised fairly early that it was actually something I was good at, having dabbled in so many sports I was rubbish at. So it's quite like, oh, hang on a second. Yeah, so very late to it. And then, found that, I think, so for me, the thing I really enjoy, and I don't know about you, Sarah, is I love competing. Right, and it happens like I love the shoulder to shoulder. I love that stuff, which is why I started cross country mountain biking. Proper shoulder to shoulder racing, hour and a half all in. And as I've kind of gone through my cycling in the past 20 years, and stuff has changed, coming back from recovery, kind of adapted to that, and maybe less of the fast stuff and kind of more longer, which requires just different mechanics and different mindset to start to push through that stuff.
So interestingly though, your world record obviously is very much a solo endeavour. So what's the difference there? Like when, what are the similarities and the differences in that kind of state?
Yeah, so I think, you got to remember, when I set my world record, it was during the pandemic.
Okay.
So there were no events.
Sure.
And I said
2020?
2020, yeah. And I'd found kind of Everesting in December 2019, and then just was banging them out every month, every 2 weeks, kind of just really, really enjoying it, indoor, outdoor, didn't really care. But obviously the world changed, didn't it? The pandemic happened, and then there was no events, there was nothing going on, there was no racing, there was no shoulder to shoulder. So then, Everesting at that time exploded, because it was it's such an easy doorstep challenge. All you need is you on a hill with your bike, right? And that was, it gave me a way of pushing myself pushing the boundaries and still feeling like you're competing without the infrastructure being there and still social distancing and everything. So yeah, that's where my world record started. And I think in that time I just kind of figured out, like I'd looked at other people doing Everest and I'd look at their training stress score, and mine was like, I was very efficient going up and down a hill. I'm rubbish on the flat, just to be very clear, but I'm very good at going up and down a hill. Yeah, so that's where mine came from. I think it was something around the context we were living in at the time. I hadn't set out, I didn't think about, well, that's not fair. There was a world record that a buddy and I were trying to do 2017, 2018, which is to try and cycle a bike higher than anybody else. So we spent a little bit of time doing that, and we went to Aconcagua in Argentina to climb, to get kind of some climbing in, and did work in the Alps, and so that was one. But that kind of fell away, and the pandemic happened. So I think I had like something in the back of my mind around a world record, but I didn't realise that the easiest one would be to just find a hill and go up and down it. For a long time.
Where did you go? Wales, wasn't it?
Yeah, Wales. I spotted this hill in Wales, and it was like, I mean, we don't have big hills here, right? You know, the previous record was set in California on a lovely sunny day on a big long hill. Like, we just don't have that. No. So I spotted one in Wales, but I couldn't go to ride it for like 2 or 3 months. But it turned out to be the one. It had a beautiful long straight, but it wasn't very steep. It was like 10% average.
Okay. Which
meant it was going to be a lot longer. So I ended up doing 616 kilometres to get the 3.5 Everests.
So what's that, 30,000 metres?
31,000
31,000 metres.
So 3.5.
For 48 hours.
Yeah, of which 46 hours, 36 were cycling. So, you know, there's probably more time off than you would have had, Sarah. But for me, that was, and there was a 5-minute nap in there. That was it, just when I needed to reboot, because the wheels had come off at about 2 a.m. on the second night, and I was hallucinating. I just needed to reboot. So I laid down, closed my eyes, and got back up and went about it again. Yeah.
Do you know, I think when you hear these numbers, it's so hard to, like, obviously I know that because we know each other, I know what your record is, but sometimes you hear it and it makes you kind of think, you know, you think about some of the biggest rides you've ever done, right? Like, I can think about doing a couple of all actors of like maybe 200-300k, maybe 5,000 meters of climbing, and just being ruined the next day, like literally having like a day off and just laying in bed. It just, it kind of blows my mind. Sarah, let's talk about you a little bit. So you're also quite recent to cycling. Is it three years roughly now?
Yeah, about three years. End of March is this year is when I got my first bike. Crazy. So learned to ride as an adult, and jumped in the deep end and haven't looked back.
So I mean, without doing like an absolute deep dive, because obviously there's been a huge amount of press around this record and around yourself, give us like a real potted history from your perspective. Like, what's the story that you like to tell about your kind of journey today?
Yeah, I guess my journey on the bike is probably an unusual one. So from the first time I picked up a bike, it was with a purpose to do an ultra event. So I was accepted into the Transcontinental in 2023. At that point, I had a broken femur and I didn't know how to ride a bike and didn't have a bike. So when I was accepted, that led me to my first purchase. And from there I had 5 months to upskill and get ready for that. And did that in 2023, went back, did it again in 2024. And at this point I was working with a coach because I decided I really loved what cycling could give you. You know, you can see the world under your own power. It gives you a whole new way to interact with humanity and you see the best of the world. So that kind of grew my addiction and my focus with the sport. And from those races, what I loved about the self-supported ultra racing was it built grit and it forced me to understand the bike incredibly well. But what I didn't like was all the faff. I didn't like wasting time trying to find a place to sleep, you know, trying to find food. So my question really over the last year has been how far and how fast can I go if my only job is to ride my bike? So that's what led my coach and I to selecting the LEJOGLE world record, which is Land's End to John O'Groats, back to Land's End. And now what we're preparing for, which is the own record. So we're calling it One Way North, so the European record.
Amazing. Yeah. So like for a lot of people, myself included, like see and saw doing something like Transcontinental as like a long-term goal, right? Something you kind of build up to. You maybe do like a super randonneur and like you build up and build up. So like what made you jump straight in with that? Like you didn't have a bike at the time. Like what was the mindset? What was the thinking there?
I think in a way, if you know any of my backstory, it was desperation. So that summer, I was actually preparing to make a bid for the LEJOGLE running record. I wanted to break the Land's End to John O'Groats running record. But my health issues meant I was struggling with broken bones, I needed surgeries, and then I broke my femur, and my healthcare team was like, you can't run anymore, like stop trying. And I had worked so hard to rebuild my fitness, rebuild my body's capabilities and resilience after regaining my mobility the decade previous, that I was just desperate for it not to go to waste. So the door had closed on me again for what I wanted to achieve in my life. But then another door opened, which was, well, I can just buy a bike and figure it out. And I think that desperation to not lose what I had worked so hard for is what got me to the start line of TCR. Even though it's not what I would recommend for most people, it was too much work and a lot of trial by fire. But yeah, it got me here, so I'm grateful.
Amazing. Alan, obviously, like maybe not quite so documented, but obviously you came back from like some serious sort of accident recovery, and you're also actually still in the recovery for Lyme at the moment, Lyme disease from a tick bite.
Yeah.
I think last year we were working on a project together for Pure Peak Grit.
Yeah.
And obviously I remember talking to you, you were hitting peak numbers and everything was looking fantastic, and then you get the call saying, I've got a tick bite. You know. So you've also then, multiple comebacks, obviously from the RTA and then, then from that. Like, is there a secret sauce to like recovering from that kind of, processing the disappointment, right? Because that's a huge thing, when you train for something and then it doesn't happen, you put so much of your energy and life into something, especially if you have a team behind you, like that's a big deal. But then like, how do you, in that darkest, deepest moment, pick yourself up and think about not just getting back to where you were, but like potentially pushing yourself even further? Like, where do you start?
Yeah, so for me, like, briefly, after the road traffic accident, I had started racing at a good level, like a national level, and I just started to get a glimpse of possibility that was like I didn't even know was there. So when that road traffic accident happened, I felt as if I'd been, it just had been robbed from me. This kind of had been taken away. And I think before that, like I was like just 40, and you feel invincible, right? And I think that accident just took away my invincibility. So I think the recovery from that is very different, because actually I had an image of myself riding in Hadley Park in the national series, and there was one image, and I was like, that's what I want to get back to. So that was very focused. I knew I wanted to get back on the bike because I wanted what had been taken away. And in some regards that made it easier. I had a clear focus, clear target that I went about doing, and it took years. And I wouldn't say I actually achieved it until probably 2018, in all honesty, because like the injuries I carry mean I had to rebuild and change myself as a rider. I wasn't as powerful on the flat, so I had to kind of adjust.
Just briefly, what are those injuries for people that don't know?
So I don't have a right glute max. So the glute max is a cycling muscle. It's particularly when you're on the flat, right? You just those glutes just tap it out. But I don't have one of those on the right hand side. So, you then go into kind of racing at a national level, and you that's a hard one to take. Luckily, mountain biking is one of those things where it's like, it's so up and down and like so kind of tough that it kind of evens things out a little bit. You don't get much flat. But what I also discovered is, the body's amazing, right? So I have a glute med that's bigger than anybody else's glute med. So that's the one that sits on top, right? Because it's just gone massive because it compensates and it beautifully builds up where there's a kind of a lacking, and my quads and stuff. So yeah, I think I'm putting out numbers I wouldn't have been putting out before that, because the body has just kind of adapted and I've come through. And then where after the accident I thought these things were off the table, and that's what medical people were saying, you're never going to do that again, you're never going to do that again, never going to do that again. And there's something I think if you do ultra endurance stuff, you're a bit belligerent, right? And it's a quality in that regard.
I think it's like, one or three of us probably share to some extent.
So then you go, right, that's your opinion. I'm not the same as everybody else. This is me. I know my body. I know what I can possibly do. So that recovery was like, it went on for years. And then there was those moments where you go, I'm getting back to something that's, the possibilities are opening. And then 2020 with the world record, it was like, oh, that's behind me now. I don't care. Like, what's possible next? But we've been working together for some years now. I've been a little bit unlucky in the past couple of years. Like Lyme has had an effect that I never thought, because it's kind of we don't know about, that I'm still struggling with actually. So my training isn't what it normally would be, as you know. But I have an ambition this year with this recovery, because it's been a different recovery. The recovery from the road traffic was a mechanical, structural rebuild, but with Lyme, it's a neurological. Your nervous system just gets destroyed. You've seen me on really bad days where I'm not making eye contact because I'm just in bits. Because
I said to you when you came earlier, you don't have that rabbit in the headlight look quite so much. Definitely, could see that before. Would you not say though that, like, although obviously the ITA is a physical rebuild, and this is slightly different, there's still like a psychology and a mindset difference. So, you know, I've mentioned at the start of this, like when you both talk, normally there's very, very little ego, but I can see there's like you share a mindset, which is quite fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think there is. I think I've gotten very good at recovery. The patience, the slow building. Yeah. I'd be really interested to hear what Sarah to think about it, because you described your recovery, and it was very different to my methodical, like hold back. You tend to go for it, and I love that.
Yeah, I think with my recovery, it was more about relearning my mind-body connection and trying. I didn't know what I was going to do when I was recovering, because I was told I may never get full mobility again, probably like you were. And so my goal wasn't to be athletic at the start. My goal was to just try to be as mobile as possible and figure out what life had in store for me. And I spent about 8 years just really trying to understand how my body was reacting to different stimuli, rebuilding that mind-body connection so I could learn to like trust my body and be in my body without fear. And when that eventually kind of came to a head, that's what gave me the confidence to start running again, which ultimately led to the bike. But I think for me, it was not so much an objective focused on records or competing. I don't actually like competing against others. It's always been about against myself. So that's been a really useful frame for me to kind of like work through these periods of recovery. Is I almost like, if I do have a big goal, I tend to forget about the goal and I just focus on like, okay, what do I need to do today? What do I need to do this week and this month to be successful? And then through time, you need to trust that your process will get you to where you want to be.
Do you feel like that mindset as well feeds into when you're on the bike and you're in those really dark moments, you know, like, you know, there's something almost meditative, actually, you talk about like the kind of flow state that you get into, and then after the flow state, obviously then things get really gnarly, right? Like when you're really deep in the kind of hurt locker and you're really struggling and you know you've got a long way to go, and like, do you think having that mindset that's come from the recovery, do you think that helps you in those dark moments, like gives you that kind of ability to kind of zone in, forget the noise and just really focus and maybe trust your instincts a lot more than other people might?
I think for me, it's when things get uncomfortable and when people want to stop, that's because of what I've been through. Like, that's almost like coming home to me. Like, I know what that feels like. And I know there was a time when I mentally just gave up, but my body kept going. And so when I'm in a really low point on the bike and I'm like in the absolute locker, I'm like, I know this. And like, I lived in this for years. And so, yeah, I can keep pedaling my bike because now I'm choosing to be in this place and I'm coming at it from a place of power. And so that's how I think about it. And in the moment itself, and a mindset practice I do when I'm training is I really focus on compartmentalizing how I'm feeling about doing the thing from the fact that I have to do the thing. And so you can feel like garbage, you can feel incredible. That's irrelevant. How you're feeling is irrelevant. What is relevant is you have to keep pedaling your bike. And that took me well over a year of training, like in my day-to-day rides, to get that to become habitual. But it was a mindset practice that now really influences the way I do these events.
There was a gentleman I rode briefly next to on one of the Mike Hall memorial rides in Wales. We were going on past the Inner Valley Dam, and he's quite, I don't remember his name now, but he's quite a famous audaxer, you know, these old guys been doing it for donkey's years, like countless super randonneurs and Parry Brest and all of that. And he was doing the 600, which, if you know the This Is Not At All rides, they're pretty brutal. I was doing the 2 and that was pretty brutal enough. And I said to him, like, I just don't know how you guys do this, right? I was still quite fresh in the All Blacks world at the time. He said to me quite matter-of-factly, you know you can turn the pedals one more time, don't you? You know how to do that. He said, well, just keep doing that.
Yeah.
And that's, honestly, it's the most simple, obvious, like, trite thing to say, but that has carried me through some really dark moments. Alan, I can remember a time where you were vomiting on the side of the bike doing an Everesting in some pretty inclement weather in Portishead not that long ago.
That's stupid.
Do you ever feel worse? That's the point. Do you ever feel like having that mindset and that ability to just kind of like say, well, I've pushed past this before? Is there like an inherent risk of maybe pushing too far because psychology says I can do this, but actually the body at some point can't?
I think you have that kind of arsenal that you build up, those little things, those hooks that you look to when it really gets, painful or uncomfortable. I think we're all comfortable with discomfort, right? That's not the problem. But there are times when it's pretty extreme. I think those little hooks from training, from the process that you can hook into, to trust that you can get through it, because trust in your body is what it's all about. I remember I did a double Everest indoors, and I had a buddy who, Matt Jones, who did the second one with me at the same time. And this is a really transformational moment for me, because we did it together, and then we were at the bottom of the last climb after 23 hours, and Matt, who's a 24-hour mountain biker, just messaged me and said, you're not going to get many chances, this far into something to see what you can do. We sprinted up that last climb, and it was just one of those things we go, oh, that's what's in the tank. That's what people mean by the final sprint. This is what your body automatically holds back. And I always remember that moment when it gets really messy and really nasty to go, yeah, it hurts, you think you're empty, and you go, but there's more in there. That's the trust, isn't it? But you gain that trust through being through the hurt locker a few times, right? So it's moments like that I draw on. And then the obvious things like, your family or... but I love what you were talking about, like, I didn't ever set out, it was never about world records or anything. It was always about figuring out what I could do. I'm a celiac, so like I've always been quite weak, and I was quite good at football and stuff, but just too small, right? I get pushed off and it's just annoying because I had the skill. And I don't think I actually discovered like my proper physicality until I was in my 30s, diet better and everything else. And I think that kind of opened up a world of like, oh, I can be strong. I can trust in my body. I can push myself, and it'll be okay. But yeah, back to your question. It's for me, it's tapping into those. And I think the last thing is that pedal stroke idea. I remember being on climbs and just being in a really bad way and just going, I just need to get to the next bend. I'll be happy with that. And then it's the next bend after that. It's that chunking, that psychology of chunking. That we're experts at chunking. And if that's about a pedal stroke, or it's about the next bend, or it's the next rep, or it's the next kilometre, or the next 10K, that's the psychology, isn't that? Would be so trusting in, than not think about the whole thing. Like if you thought about the whole thing that you're about to, you'd crumble. And if you're in it, you think about the whole thing. So it's like, what's that thing that seems attainable, seems achievable in that moment, and that's enough.
So I mean, for something like LEJOGLE, but especially for this, like so much of that, it's a much longer duration, like multi-day, like into 2 weeks even. Like planning is obviously a huge part. You've got a great team, you looked at the route, looked at the things, but obviously plans are great until they're not great. Like in that situation, maybe looking at LEJOGLE as a good example, like with the moments where how you or the team reacted changed versus what was planned. Like how do you kind of plan for the unplannable, I guess?
Our planning was bulletproof.
Okay.
I'm serious. It was bulletproof. We spent 8 months with an interdisciplinary team. I build teams for a living in my corporate job. We had, everyone from like portfolio managers, data scientists, individuals with military backgrounds, project managers, and we have 5 no-fail pillars. And the crew's job is to not fail those 5 pillars. And like, those are things that we can control. That's like nutrition, that's navigation, that's medical, that's sleep. And so we approached those and gave individuals accountabilities for those so we would not fail. And then the other elements that we can't control, such as weather, wind, environment, we approach them in terms of probabilities. And we had different plans for, different probabilities that actually led us to, 30 hours before I was supposed to start LEJOGLE. We were going to start in Land's End. We actually had a team call and made the executive decision to start in John O'Groats, looking at the weather patterns. But we knew this was a potential. And so we could control what we could. And for the things that cropped up during the event where we just had no foresight of them, the team was incredible at everyone was pulling towards the same objective. So we always focused objective first, team second, individual third. And that way we instilled a really strong no blame culture and solutions focused culture. So no one cared that there was a problem going on. Everyone was trying to find out how do we move through it. And that's how we nailed LEJOGLE. And we're taking the exact same process forward to the own record now too.
It's a great book, actually. I've just been reading called Unreasonable Hospitality.
Okay.
And it's fascinating. It's about a restaurant in New York and the things that they did in the team to kind of have everyone just pushing and making everything redundant in terms of failure, making those experiences perfect and finding that 0.1% improvement every single day.
Yeah.
Are there things that you think you're taking into own that maybe are different to last time? Is it just a carbon copy just with a different challenge, or are there new things that you've taken on board?
I would say probably my perspective is slightly different, not because of what we've done in the past, but more because the major difference this year is I've taken a sabbatical from my corporate job to focus on this project and build this project. So the last year I've been able to really deepen my relationship with individuals in the industry, which has been fantastic. It's how I met you.
Sure.
and really learn the craft more. My job now is to ride my bike. And it's changed my relationship to the bike, and I'm really excited this year and feel slightly less overwhelmed this year at what's ahead of me because I have more experience and more conditions on my bike and the confidence from years previous. Even though I would say I'm trying not to think about the past too much and what we've achieved, we're still very much forward facing.
I was listening to the Mark Beaumont podcast, which definitely people should listen to. It's a really nice in-depth conversation, and he was talking there about how you were schooling up the climbs and things, but actually you were also really learning from looking at different lines through corners and looking at the bike handling side of things. So I think it's quite fascinating. Alan, obviously you still have a full-time job. I think most people do have work and responsibilities or children, whatever. How do you manage to kind of train to the extent that you do for some of these activities and sort of fit that in around, kind of adapt around a normal life?
Yeah, so I'm quite lucky in one way. I don't work 5 days a week, I work 4, and I think that did free up. I don't work Thursdays, and that did free up just an extra bit of time. I think I train very sensibly. There are no wasted sessions. There's no junk miles. After the world record, I did lots of kind of successful 24-hour mountain bike racing because I really got a kick out of it. And in that period, I figured out actually to race 24, I don't need to cycle in training 80% or anything near that. I'd still do 3-4, maybe, as you're coming close to it, 6-hour rides. So that idea that you can go long, you have to train long, you don't. It's, you do the sessions, the sessions are each one has a purpose, you hit that target, and then it's much more efficient with your time. And then, there probably are points, if you talk to my wife, that it goes on the other side and you're juggling. But I'm just a strong... And consistency, right? Consistency is king. If you get that consistency there, then you can afford a session to drop out or something because something comes up, and that's fine because you have that consistency. But for me, it's not about training hours. It's about training quality every single time. And every session has a complete purpose. And then you get less hours. You will need to do less time on the bike because it all adds up and you're ticking the boxes in the right way. So you can manage it. Not always perfect, but it can be done.
I would agree. I mean, my longest ride is 5 hours.
Yeah.
So you don't, it's quality over quantity and making sure that when you're on the bike, you're working to your power. Even if that's an easy ride, that means staying in zone 1, zone 2. Not pushing above. And those effects do compound through time. Yeah.
And it's funny, I bring friends of mine, we go for a zone 2 ride. They're going, that'll be too easy. It's not. If you do zone 2, properly zone 2, where the chain is always tight for, 3, 4, 5 hours, you're going to be pretty tired after that. But that's not, people, like, it's just that consistency, even on that ride, to keep it zone 2. You know, we're so tempted to kind of sprint off from up a hill or whatever. It's like backing off on the hills. You know, it's just a different mindset, isn't it? And I think there's a belief in kind of ultra that the more miles you do, the better you'll be. But I think, you know, people that are at the front end of that they know that, but that's not the case. It's smart training.
This is the first year I've ever done any sort of indoor training. I've never been able to do it. I've had the stages bike from actually when we first had a Kostüme. I had one then because I thought I need to like test kit out quite quickly, and maybe not have to go out on the road and do it, and just could never get my head around using it. And then actually this year I started using it for the first time, and it's following some of the plans, like really remarkable the effect that it has. Like really quite shocked at how much difference it makes.
Yeah.
So I mean, there are no shortcuts to this stuff, right? If you had to like maybe say a thing that has the biggest impact, like what's the one thing in kind of training or life, like whether it's like sleep, nutrition, any particular exercises, what's the thing that you kind of feel has the biggest impact into your kind of general fitness? That's for both of you, whoever wants to take that one first.
So I think I learned some time ago that increased cortisol is just bad for performance, right? So arriving at an event stressed off your head, you're just going to perform badly. And I knew this because I'd arrive at races and it was always a task to be there and just really kind of letting everything fall into place. It was really tough. So I think now I just try to be a little bit more relaxed, take the pressure off myself. It'll be what it'll be. But I think, you know, just kind of being less stressed, because obviously cortisol suppresses testosterone. So if you can go in a little bit like more relaxed to things, I think that really helps, even with your training, you know what I mean? That's hard to manage, but I think because I'm coming through Lyme disease.
I was about to say, like Lyme's given you a good kind of window into that cortisol thing.
Yeah, and where it appears in your life that you just don't really suspect, whether that's through mobile phones or whatever, which I probably don't want to get into now, but that detox has really helped with my cortisol levels and just being more relaxed because of that. So I think stress can have a massive effect on your training and generally on your performance. For me, anyway.
Sarah?
Can I say 2?
Just go on, absolutely. The more the better. People will be taking notes, I'm sure.
The 2 biggest things I've learned to ride my bike further and faster is, number 1, do less. This is kind of what you were saying before. When in doubt, do less.
It's such a hard one though, isn't it?
The conversations I've had with my coach where he's been like, just stop, stop riding your bike, like you'll be better, when the light bulb went off. It was like a completely new world for me. So number 1, do less. Number 2, get in the gym. I will die on this hill. A lot of people know that I lift heavy weights. I love doing it. I work my upper body a lot, not just my legs. Ultra endurance sport of any kind, especially cycling, is a test of robustness. It's not just a test of your aerobic and anaerobic system. It's total body robustness, and you need to be strong everywhere in order to kind of do that well. So those would be my 2. Do less and get in the gym.
And then obviously strength is also psychological. Like, we talk a lot about that kind of flow state and the meditative aspects of this. Have either of you ever meditated? Is that something you've ever sort of tried or considered trying?
So I have done just because of Lyme and like getting up and like having to just spend time and not look at phones and not kind of do anything for the first hour while your body tries to set itself an intent for the day that isn't stressed or whatever. So I think I've sort of seen the value of that from this, and I still do. I hadn't before that, to be honest. Meditated in a formal sense of meditation.
No, I can't be alone with my thoughts. I think
you can't be alone with yourself. You do ultra endurance. That's fantastic.
I think of these events almost as moving meditations.
Of course,
I suppose, because you do have to. There are times where you have to compartmentalize and block everything out. So I think movement in itself, if you're doing an endurance event, is a form of meditation, because you have to control quite strongly what you let into your mind and what you kind of reflect on in the process. So that's how I would think of it, but I couldn't just sit and think about my day or anything of that nature. I have to be in motion.
Actually, go on.
So it's interesting because you talked about, the team around you and the uncontrollables when they come in and managing that. I've got like this little tick list that I go through in my head. It's the 5 controllables for me, because actually there's always, even when you're on the bike and you're on your own, there are things within your control. Like your power, is always in your control. Your position on the bike, it's always in your control. Your breathing is always in control if it's kind of, you know what I mean? And if it's in your chest and it's, you know, your self-talk, not always, but you can address it. You can bring in some of the more positive self-talk as you're going through. So I think there's like, there are things that you can control. And I always go back to those. If it's feeling like it's out of my control, or it's, I come back to, right, just on the bike right now, I've got these controllable things that I can address each time. And that tick list makes me feel confident. It's like, okay, so actually just here, I'm in control of all I can be. The rest, the weather, everything else, can't control that. So don't try.
Yeah. It's almost like what you focus on expands.
Yeah.
And so if you focus on what you can control,
Yeah.
then you feel more empowered to keep going. Whereas if you focus on how awful everything is, that sets up the doom spiral where you'll scratch before you need to, right?
Yeah. I mean, my bike is like silent, right? It doesn't make a sound. I went to one by, like I eliminated every noise. I'm on like fat tubeless tires, you know, and like those little niggly noises, things like that just drive me crazy for a long distance. And anything like on that note, I guess, any kind of obsessions, this was actually also a question from someone on Instagram, about sort of obsessive cravings or thoughts. So like I would always get towards the end of let's say a 300, like the last 50k, I would just absolutely obsess about one thing, like a food or like a drink or getting in the, any, you know, for those longer distances, like what do you obsess about? Where does the brain go?
I think it's hard because I find, you know, your cravings change in any long ride anyway.
Sure.
So I never know, like, I don't think, I think it's dependent on the ride, and what you've had, and it changes, I think. So it's almost like the thing that, like, I don't know, a bagel with honey on it, and jam as well, or something. It's like, but that will not be the thing I don't ever come back to that repeatedly. It'd be, somehow your body tells you or an ice cream or a cone or something, a 99, who knows? But it's specific to where you are and, you know, maybe what your body's lacking or whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? That's what I find. I don't think I have a go-to craving. Not for me anyway.
Sarah?
How about you?
No, when it comes to food, I would say the same. It's very much a function of like where I'm at the time. But you need to listen to your body, and I would say eat intuitively, but in my events, I need to be forced to eat a little bit more, I think, than I would want to. So it's more a function of just trying to understand what I can get down and digest. And that changes throughout my events. So I start with solid foods, and I usually transition to like predominantly liquid calories by the end of the event, because it's really difficult. All my blood is, you know, going to my legs, not to my stomach. But when it comes to, you know, you mentioned, you know, you're 50k out from the finish, it's like all you can think about. I purposefully don't like knowing how much time I have left to the finish. So my process is similar to what Alan described. It's my cadence, my watts, and my heart rate, and like I don't deviate from that focus until my team tells me I'm in like the final 5k and the support van drives off to the finish line. It's only at that point do I let myself think like, okay, you're finishing this now, it's done now. But I don't let myself think that until we're there.
And like, is the kind of the feed regime, is that completely pre-calculated? So like you don't have, like, if you're feeling hungry, you're kind of forced to wait for the next feed, you know, is that all kind of pre-decided? It's all pre-decided.
Okay. So I tend to eat every 20 minutes on the bike. So even in my like most aero setups, I have a top tube bag. I use the Restrap race line that I really like, and that is stuffed with anything. Like usually you'll find like a couple Mars bars. Some precision carb chews are really easy for me to eat.
They're good.
So I shove those in there. So every 20 minutes, my team is on comms being like, you have to eat. And then every 4 hours, when I take my 10-minute break, then I'll have warm food. So that's usually like porridge, bagels as well. Bagels with cream cheese is a big one for me. So it just varies.
It's interesting. 4 hours is kind of like, I'd figured out that's my point, where it's good to stop from Everesting. I'll always just go 4 hours, and for some reason it's interesting you say 4 hours as well. It's a good kind of a block.
It seems to be a lot of people who do these events, and I know Mark has done the same. It's you ride in 4-hour segments, you take a short break, and then just ad infinitum.
That's why All Blacks is good, because you've always got the controls every sort of 50-ish k. You know, you stop, you've got a nice random cafe that someone's found in the middle of like the Welsh countryside or whatever.
That's very good.
There's a lot of good reasons like All Blacks, but that's definitely one good reason, good cafe stops.
So what I'm surprised about there is you went for Mars, not Snickers.
I did. Are you Team Snickers?
I'm Team Snickers, yeah, absolutely. It somehow feels there's some goodness, there's nuts in it as
Yeah.
well.
They're like this big now, right? Like when we were kids, they were like,
It's a bite.
so to get through one as a kid. Now they're like one go.
Yeah.
What about as a celiac? Like, how do you manage that? Like, especially somewhere, I don't know, like obviously thinking back to the Atlas Mountains, we had to scratch because of having to carry so much stuff with you.
So I think I figured out, and I can say they said that, like remote ultra day, multiple day, that just doesn't suit me. I'm not built for it. I don't have the reserves. And being celiac and vegetarian, I mean, before Atlas, I'd started eating meat, which I really hated doing, just because I knew that might be the case.
Wow.
But the thing about Atlas is, what you get, if you find something, it's probably omelette, and, eggs are not good calories. There's not much in them, really. I really struggled with that, and it probably was the event where I thought, I don't really want to be putting myself in a situation where I'm getting into such a deficit and the recovery after will be so long and everything, that it's probably, I put myself, but that's what you do, you keep pushing the boundaries, right? And I think for me as a celiac, it's like, I really like eating healthy, so I don't see the point. So I think what I figured out is, for me, it's those multi-remote days are just not for me, but actually the 600, 700, 800k, those sorts of ones where it's like 2 days and stuff, I mean, that's my sweet spot, which is why Pure Peak Grit was one of those ones that really piqued my interest, because it's tons of climbing, but it's in control as well, because you come back through the kind of headquarters a couple of times, so you can get some good food into you. And I think, like all of us will be, you have the, you eat natural, food for the first, third half. And when I'm Everesting or anything, it'll only be the last third that I touch gels and stuff. Just to push when you can't, as you say, your blood's going to your legs, not to your stomach. And with the record, it was exactly the same. It was like I'm very specific about the food that I eat, because I have to be, because being a celiac as well, it's like my stomach is not very strong. Like I have friends who do 24-hour racing on gels. I just can't, that's not for me. It's not going to work.
I'm the same.
Yeah. So you have to work to your system and what works for you. But I think I just ruled out the multi-day remote, because it's, as a celiac and a vegetarian, it's just not for me. But I tried it.
What about the sleeping aspect of those kind of rides? Because that's something else that's like discussed a lot. And actually, Sarah, you'll have an opinion on this, obviously. With I read the feedback on LEJOGLE and the amount of sleep you had there, and it's just, even with a child, I'm like, oh god, that's not very much sleep. Like, how do you sort of approach that side of things with the sleep? Are you sort of on the lines of like, push it as much as you can into debt, or are you sort of one of these people that
I think
sleep more?
So I think, like, I've been a kind of cycling fan of a long time, but I've also kind of dot watched so much over the past 20 years, and I read loads and watch loads around it, and I've seen a kind of a shift, obviously. Definitely. In terms of, people winning Atlas Mountains on, 2 hours of sleep and stuff isn't like, people are going in now, they're trying to get consistent sleep every night.
Brownlee just did Dale's Divide with no sleep at all, didn't he? In one, I think last week, was it?
Yeah, he did, yeah. So there's still, it's still happening, but I think, so where I fall is, I know if I go beyond 38 hours, it's trouble. And I've done that twice, and I've seen the hallucinations and stuff. That's just me. That's my sleep thing. So I try not to go beyond 38 hours without sleep, because it's not going to particularly work for me. It's going to go bad. For other people, they can push through to 48, and it won't be so much of an issue, but it is for me. So, like with Atlas, for example, my plan was to try and get, consistent sleep. So not just skip the first night completely. I was trying to put something in the bag. And then the second night kind of try to look to get 3 hours of sleep. But we see a lot of riders now trying to do that, like Lachlan Morton when he did the Tour Divide, that was a lot of sleep. Did it the fastest, what I mean?
It's bounced back in that direction, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, so I don't know, but I think it's an individual thing. I think you can work out how much sleep. As I said, for me it's 38 hours, I'm no good after that. So it's, it's completely diminishing returns. There's no point in me being 44 or 48 hours into something still thinking I'm pushing out anything like what I would without sleep. But I think one of the things I have learned is this, like, you can quantify it, like, but a 5-minute micro nap where you're not sleeping but you're rebooting like a computer. You're wiping away. I remember taking that during the world record and like close my eyes and the colors and everything streaming like a video game, right? But just 5 minutes was enough to get me to the end. I'd similarly use 20 minutes, to be like just that, a reboot rather than a re-sleep, right?
Yes.
Which can be very, very powerful. But I'm really interested in what you think, because obviously with the record coming up and your plan around sleeping, like you've obviously found what works for you in terms of sleep from practice, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say with the sleep thing, a lot of people are latching on to what I'm going to be attempting to do with the European record, but that's not my anchor point. Like, that's our plan, but we'll deviate from that if we have to. I would say the way people plan their sleep strategies should be largely dependent on the event that they're doing and what they want to achieve with the event. So if you're doing an unsupported race, you need more sleep because you can't put yourself into a state where you're like not able to make decisions and not able to be rational. Like, it doesn't make sense to do that. So you do need more sleep. The events that I do are fully crewed and like fully supported. I am never alone on the road. So by design, I am able to be more extreme in the way that we push the sleep deprivation. So I would say, while people may get shocked at like what we're trying to do, I would say it's structured very differently. And my objective in the event is really to like find the limit of my human endurance holistically, not just like how fast I can go on the bike, but like what I can actually persevere through. And so if we find I need to extend sleep so I can like keep my mileage up, we'll do that. But if we can condense the sleep down to 90 minutes a night, then we'll stay on that track as long as possible. I think what's working for me is I know what that feels like now to be on that level of sleep depth for a week. And so I have a benchmark now, and I know what I'm going to feel when I'm in that. So I have more confidence going into it this time.
I mean, that's a really good point. Like the safety aspect is covered. Which changes the game.
It does.
You just cannot be, I've seen like at GB Duro, like when you're in the camp and people come in and they've ridden through the night and stuff, and you see, just the effect of sleep deprivation, like the inability to complete a task, like a simple task, and just, the slurred talk and stuff. So it like, you wouldn't do that unless you had, the safety, the crew around you to make that possible.
And the crew needs to have the experience to manage you through that, right? So they need to know how to respond and like what's a safe level versus an unsafe level as well. So I would say don't push the sleep depth just for the sake of it. When in doubt, like always sleep more is what I would say.
Yeah, and I remember during the world record, I had two teammates who were in the pit essentially, and there came a point after about 40 hours where they were like, I could feel one of them as feeling this is unsafe. And the other one was like, okay, we can have a bit of a nap and it'll be okay, and that's probably an unfair position to put anybody in, because I was like saying, I don't want to stop, but something has to change, right? Because I was hallucinating. And they, they're 24-hour experts, so they kind of get it, but probably not the experience to kind of know, right, actually, here's what's going on, this is what we should do. So I probably should have planned for that better, because that was always going to happen. But
do you feel like generally speaking, would you say that you kind of have to push yourself past that point of failure to learn to kind of, I think about something like Formula One, right? Like they're trying to dive into the car, and like if you're not crashing, you're not pushing yourself to the limit, right? You've got to really find what those limits are, and that often means going over that limit.
Yeah. Well, for me, that's how I found I need to sleep after 38 hours, because like it was going beyond that 3 or 4 times, and you go, right, this is like the performance drops massively, so there's no point. So I think you do have to go beyond it to find out, and everybody's different,
So I guess like Sarah, let's say something like LEJOGLE, right? You beat the record, all went pretty perfectly. Obviously there were difficult moments, but like had you failed, are there other things that you would have learned from that you would take forward? Like is there kind of learnings in that failure?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's learnings in everything. So I think we obviously didn't get it perfect in LEJOGLE. I lost consciousness, went into hypoglycemic shock. The last night, my body actually went into shock during my last nap. So it was, there was things we definitely didn't get right. But the saving grace for all of that was that my crew was highly experienced, and they could help me claw my way out of the hole every single time. But I would never advise that for anybody doing unsupported racing or even crewed racing if they don't have the experience to try to do that. So you really need to be surrounded by people, and you need to have a really strong decision-making structure in place over like who gets the decision, like to pull you off the bike, who is able to tell you how to sleep, and like what metrics are they looking at to kind of like help negotiate that, because it's calculated risk taking after a certain point, which I personally am comfortable with in the context of the projects we take on.
Yeah.
But I would say for anybody doing like the unsupported racing or the ultra racing, like it's not necessarily safe in those applications, and I would never do it in those applications.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would say, when it comes to like comparisons and like what other people are doing, anchor to your body and like anchor to what you know, and then just push it a little bit. Like push it just a little bit and see how you feel, because you can always pull it back.
Yeah.
But like don't go
Yeah.
like extreme right off the bat.
Comes full circle actually to the start of the conversation, which was, you know, looking at like whether you can kind of train that instinct, right? There's like when you're under that extreme fatigue, that decision making becomes like very difficult, but without being in that position multiple times, you know, kind of learning is similar with running a business actually as well, having that kind of founder instinct. Couple ones we're going to finish on that are slightly different, one of which I'm quite interested to get your views as kind of sort of latecomers to this in life, as I am also with road cycling particularly. What your general take is like on the kind of world of road cycling, the marketing, the industry itself, what you see other cyclists doing, apparel, like what I think some people have kind of grown up with road cycling particularly. There's a lot of kind of emotional tie to racing and the Tour de France and like all of those sorts of things, and I think there's been, especially since COVID, a lot of people coming into the sport relatively late and are kind of interested in that, but they're kind of taking cycling in a different direction. So I just wonder what your thoughts were looking sort of in at the industry generally and the kind of sport generally, kind of what are the good, the bad and the ugly, what do you think could be better?
See, I'm a mountain biker. That's my kind of background.
That was me, exactly. Yes.
So like almost, we are very new to road, and actually if push comes to shove, I'd rather be on a mountain bike and off the road. I think, you know, for me, the industry, like technologically, it's been like amazing. Like the bikes we started riding 20 years ago, like what they can do now is just phenomenal. The weight, everything, the possibilities with those bikes. So that feels like, you know, huge leaps forward, and some of that spills over into the road as well. So I think that's been really exciting part of the industry. What else?
How do you feel about the marketing? Do you feel like, you know, because it's interesting because you're both at such extreme heights in terms of your abilities and your records, that, you know, those sorts of things, but you're maybe sort of like not as inside the industry as some people that maybe have those sorts of records and backgrounds are. So you have a sort of unique kind of outsider perspective. So like, do you feel like the marketing talks to you? Do you feel like, I mean, what do you think about sustainability? Like, just, it's fascinating to kind of, we don't really have these conversations before. So I'm just interested to kind of get a gent like Sarah, how do you feel, especially as a woman, you know, like how does it speak to you as an industry and a sport?
Yeah, this year has been fascinating because it's my first time kind of going full time inside this industry, and we've had the privilege of, you know, partnering with some of the biggest names in industry across nutrition, you know, cycling, everything, as part of this project. And so I've really gotten like a deep side insider's look at it. And I guess my honest reflections are like 95% of those in the industry are incredible. Like the innovations are incredible, and they're like authentically behind, you know, the consumers that they're catering for. You know, like everybody wants to see you win and they want to support. And that's been incredibly humbling to kind of see that, and reassuring. Another thing I've really loved is just seeing the level of innovation that occurs, you know, whether it's in like the aero testing or like in the kit, in the bikes. But something that I think when we reflect on marketing, that is letting us down a bit, I think, is like, and this is any industry, it's just the push on consumerism and that you always need new.
Yeah.
And I've been privileged that, you know, I've had bikes gifted to me for this event, and they're like some of the best in industry. I'm still an advocate that like the best bike in the market is the bike that you already have. And it's something I'm really kind of struggling with rationalizing this year, because on one hand, we're trying to innovate and I'm trying to set records. But on the other hand, I was successful before I had all of this. So it's like, how can we get that message out that the sport is still accessible, you know, while also celebrating the innovation that comes with it. So I think it's been a mixed bag, but I would say probably overwhelmingly positive.
I think aspiration is an interesting one, right? Like aspiration is a positive thing, but I feel personally that, you know, the kind of the industry has been maybe overly aspirational in its marketing in recent years, you know, the whether it's like the kind of photography that gets used or the way things get reported or the you know, the cost of the bikes and so on. So yeah, I feel like there's some grounding that needs to be done perhaps, and actually, like, obviously the industry's been having a tough time as well post-COVID, right? So I think there's been some reality checks, but it feels a little bit to me like everything is just going as it was. You know, there are some innovations and some things happening, but yeah, I don't know, I think there's a lot of work to be done for people to look outside of the bubble a little bit at other successful sports or industries.
People want to see themselves at the end of the day.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. And we don't all have £10,000 bikes and access to beautiful mountain passes on the doorsteps.
Exactly.
You know, I remember talking to an athlete. I think it was last year. I won't name names. Another female athlete and very successful one. And she was saying to me how she'd reached a stage where she was electing to not upload her training rides to Strava because she felt like it wasn't good enough.
Yeah,
you know?
I don't have Strava for that reason. I
Crazy.
don't post my training online because sometimes I do post it, the comments just come flooding in, and so I'm just like not interested, and I don't want that feedback for me personally. But then I also don't want to post my workouts and have other people be like, well, I could never do that, so I'm just not even going to try. Right? So it's like a double-edged sword where it's like you want to share and make things accessible, but then you're also opening yourself to a lot at the same time. So I don't know what the solution is. But I think it's just about authenticity and just trying to get as many diverse leaders, you know, into the marketing as possible, whether it's community and like social builders in cycling, whether it's like the elite pro athletes, like record setters, or whether it's people going out and doing these like adventure sport on their bikes. I think all three need to be represented equally.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. Maybe let's end it on a kind of forward-looking one. Like, let's say you're in your armchair, maybe like 60s, 70s, looking back on your kind of, you know, your time as a, you know, on the bike and everything. Like, how do you think that would look, and like, what do you think you would tell current you about your lived experience and on the bike and off the bike?
Well, I think like we're at different stages. I'm 55 next month, and that's, you know, it's just different. It's, you know, your body, the system works differently. The mechanics are just, so I think I'm trying to give myself an easy time. I'm trying to enjoy cycling again. I think sometimes, you know, when you're recovering from something, you know, you're eager, you're trying to get back. And I think, you know, just that joy of cycling. I don't think I'll regret when I'm 70 or on my deathbed that I didn't work enough, but I'll probably think I didn't cycle enough, you know. So I think I'd look back and kind of just say enjoy it, you know, because it's tough and you can make it tough, but it's ultimately a choice. You know, we choose to do these things, and it's got to be about enjoyment. My wife would definitely tell me that if I came back from an event and I was like, you know, annoyed, she'd be like, well, you chose to do it, didn't you? So I think just enjoy it. And really with the last 9 months not being able to do that and kind of feeling like it was taken away again, I suddenly enjoy cycling. You know, in all its kind of, you know, whether that's meeting buddies and road riding or whether it's just on my own kind of cycling to the top of Wales and back down just because that'd be an amazing thing to do. Yeah, I think that's it. And it is my best thinking time. I'm a designer, and that's where I get my best thinking time. It's medicine often, you know, 100%. Stressful week or whatever. So yeah.
I mean, the irony of running a cycling brand and not having time to ride a bike. Right? Every time I do get back on the bike, I have three great ideas. I've solved 3 problems, you know, and I come back feeling 100 times. My wife's always saying to me, just get out even for an hour, you know, but it can be very hard to switch off and find the time to do that sometimes when you're deep in the middle of running a business.
So we're cycling next week, right?
Definitely.
Okay, grand.
Sarah, what would you tell yourself?
I think everything comes into your life for a season, and so I'm in the season of cycling. I'm not going to be a cyclist forever. I don't even know if I'll be doing it at this time next year.
Fascinating.
And I'm okay with that. And I think looking back on it, I would like to tell myself that all the work was worth it, and it was an epic side quest, because you have to live your life like you want to leave no cards on the table. And I think I'll be grateful for this period, but also equally grateful to find, you know, new and exciting adventures moving forward as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you both. We're really glad we had time to do this. I'm going to post all like social following, all that kind of stuff when I post the video, so you'll be able to find that. Alan Colville and Sarah Ruggins on Instagram. Sarah, we're probably going to be posting this probably while you're doing the challenge, so
Oh my gosh.
really hope everything's going well.
Me
Best
too.
of luck for that. And Own 2026 is the website, and various channels. I'm sure if you probably found this through the coverage anyway. So thanks for both your time, and look forward to future adventures.
Thank
Thanks, Ed.
you.
Thanks.